Hey there, Nocturnals! Welcome back to English Me, dito sa Nocturnal Sage, a guide for those left in the dark. Ako nga pala ulit, si Kuya N, ang inyong class president. Noong nakaraang meeting with Sir Jeremy, diniscuss niya yung tungkol sa speech communication process. Natutunan natin kung paano mag-interact, ano ba yung components of the speech communication process ulit? Yung message, yung channel, yung situation, etc. Kung gusto nyo balikan, i-click nyo lang yung suggestion sa itaas para mapanood nyo at makarelate kayo sa pag-uusapan natin tonight. So ano ba yung pag-uusapan natin with Sir Jeremy tonight? Medyo masakit sa ulo, pero worth it siya kasi marami tayong mas maiintindihan natin yung mga situations kung saan, let's say, bakit ganito yung usapan? Bakit kuwari, bakit sabat siya ng sabat? O hindi ako makasingit, kailan ako papasok? O kailan ako tatahimik? Di ba minsan ganun yung mga tanong natin kapag naiipit tayo kuwari sa awayan ng mga mahal natin sa buhay o mga kakilala natin sa school o sa trabaho, di ba, napapaisip tayo paano tayo kikilos sa ganung sitwasyon. So, yung pag-uusapan nating models and theories ay nandoon para maintindihan lang natin lalo yung kung paano gumalaw yung mga process parang gumalaw yung mga components ng speech communication process. So, ano ba hinihintay natin? Patumpik-tumpik pa tayo. Samahan nyo na nga ako sa ating klase ngayon para malaman natin kung ano yung models at theories na to. Oh English me, oh English me, gusto kong matuto ng Ingles pero hindi alam kung paano.
Good evening, class. Welcome back to another episode of Oral Communication in Context. For tonight, we will talk about something technical, something theoretical, models of communication. Okay, you might find yourselves thinking, I thought this would be a practical course. Why are we talking about theories now? Well, theories at least help us understand why something happens, or even if it's not the absolute cause for something, it at least helps us explain why this and that event occurs. Practically speaking, we would want to know why, let's say, you had this argument with your parents, you had this misunderstanding with your friends. In order to solve the problem, you need help in analyzing why certain communication problems occur. And that's the reason why we study models of communication. Now, there are three models that we will discuss for tonight. If you are in case viewing this at nighttime, but during the day, then okay, then today. So the first model is this. Let's zero in. Okay, it's I've got to tell you something. Listen only, okay? If that is the situation, then it conforms to the transmission or linear model. When we say transmission or linear model, the message travels from point A, from the sender, to point B, the receiver. Okay, do you see the labels on this model? If you need help identifying what these labels mean, check out the previous episode on the speech communication process. You notice there are how many elements here? How many components of the speech communication process? The sender, that's one. The message, the receiver, the channel, and then the interference or noise. So we have 5 components of the speech communication process present in the linear model. By the way, the transmission or linear model was developed by Warren Weaver and Elwood Shannon. This context was 1949 when telephone lines had weaker transmission strengths. The emphasis then, the importance was placed on getting the message across as clearly as possible so that the receiver would understand. This model of communication is then more appropriate for a marketing, public relations, and other customer-friendly communication styles. Because, yes, as mentioned above, the battle cry is, I've got to tell you something, listen only, okay? Listen clearly so that you'd understand my product, my message, so that I can persuade you to buy my services or product. So that's a transmission or linear model. Okay, moving on, we have the interactive model. It's let me tell you something, then I will listen to you. The same elements, the same components of the speech communication process are present. However, we have few additions. First, we have another arrow. Okay, the first arrow comes from the first sender to the receiver, and then the second arrow is from the receiver who becomes the sender. Then the message travels back to the original sender. It's a give and take process, in short. Another addition is the field of experience. We have two fields of experience here. Now this one signifies the background, the bias, the prejudices, the judgments of both parties. So you can see here in the interactive model, both parties have the chance to be the sender and the receiver. However, they have to take turns, okay? Turn taking is important here. If the linear model's context is the telephone lines, the interactive models is the rise of chat rooms. Isn't it that when you converse on a group chat in Facebook or whichever platform you're using, you have to take turns. You cannot send messages simultaneously. Notice the timestamps beside each message. So that's the interactive model of communication. You say something, I listen, and then I reply. I tell you my message in response to what you've said. Technically, what you've written, since the context is chat rooms. Now, the last model of communication is the transactional model. We have no other choice but to speak and listen as needed. This one is different than the other two models in the sense that the arrows that surround message change. So if the interactive model has two arrows, the first one pointing from the first sender to the first receiver, and then the second arrow from the second sender to the second receiver, the transactional model's arrow for message goes like this. This means that both parties can be the sender and receiver at the same time. We are actually sending messages and receiving them simultaneously without probably being conscious of it. And in that case, feedback, you see the arrows here for feedback, you notice the cyclical appearance of these arrows. It means to say that constantly, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, we are giving and receiving feedback on our messages. So that's the transactional model. So the transmission model applies to telephone lines, to customer-oriented communication. The transmission model is to get our message across as clearly as possible with minimal interruptions or interference. With the interactive model, the context is chat rooms where turn taking is important when sending and receiving messages. While the last model, the transactional model, it is oriented towards face-to-face communication, like what we do, let's say during Zoom or Google Meet meetings. Yes, you know what I mean? We cannot help but, let's say, if we are talking, someone interrupts us, cuts us off, which is undesirable, but it happens in the transactional model of communication. In the transactional model of communication, we get cut off, we get interrupted. Sometimes we have to play it by ear when figuring out when to speak or pause. So there you have it, the three models of communication. So let's count how many components of the speech communication process are present in the transactional model. We have the sender, the receiver, the message, the channel, the interference, the field of experience, then feedback. Yes, the channel of feedback. So we have 7 components present here. While for the interactive model, we have minus the channel of feedback, we have only 6. So continue surviving in the dark and see you in the next episode.
Oh English me, oh English me, gusto kong matuto ng Ingles pero hindi alam kung paano. Sino ang magtuturo? Gusto kong matuto na talaga. Oh English me. Dulas! Are you gay?
Ano ang sasabihin mo?
Are you into people of the same sex? Kung nagustuhan ninyo ang episode na ito, pakilike lang dyan sa baba. Tapos kung may mga questions kayo or suggestions kung paano mapapaganda yung lesson na ito, well, comment nyo na lang din. Kung may kakilala kayong nagtitake ng oral com sa panahon ngayon or kahit anong speech class, i-share nyo naman to sa kanila. Share nyo yung video na to, mas maganda yung buong playlist. Kung naghahanap kayo ng safe space para maglabas ng saloobin, mag-open ng topics na hindi nyo basta-basta naiuungkat sa mga pangkaraniwan ninyong usapan, kasama ang pamilya at kaibigan, sumali kayo ng Nocturnal Space, yung link nasa baba. Doon, may makikilala kayo, baka may makilala kayong kapareho pala ng topics. At higit sa lahat, mag-subscribe at itap yung notification bell para hindi kayo mahuli sa anumang updates. New episodes every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Salamat sa panonood. Ako muli si Kuya N. Kita-kits sa susunod na episode ng English Me dito sa Nocturnal Sage, a guide for those left in the dark.